Sri Aurobindo tells us or feels that mankind, have reached a point in the evolution of consciousness where mind is at its limit. Nature has evolved life out of matter, has evolved mind out of life, and all the creatures that embody these things. We have come to the human being, and in the human being, the faculty of mind has exercised itself, has purified itself, and has reached a certain point where it can hardly go any further. And he feels that we are at a special moment, which is what we call the modern age, when humanity is feeling the pressure from within to go beyond the mental faculty. Mind has come up against the walls of its own limitations. It has also come up against the possibilities of its own full manifestation. Indeed, Sri Aurobindo is not the only one to feel this way in modern times. Science fiction writer H.G. Wells has written a history of the world in which his last chapter is called Mind at the End of Its Tether. The tether is the rope that ties an animal, a horse or a cow, to a stake. And when it reaches the end in its grazing, that is the end of its tether. So many philosophers have sensed this capacity of the limitation of mind which has been reached by humanity today. This sense of the exploration of the mental consciousness that has reached its culmination is present to us from the very beginning of what is known as the Age of Enlightenment or the Age of Reason from the 18th century. Later we find philosophers like Hegel who have spoken of an evolutionary drift of consciousness in nature, talking about the end of time. To Hegel, the end of time is the culmination of the power of rationality, because to him, what is evolving in and through nature is the power of reason. Reason is what he calls consciousness. He equates it with God, and that is what has been evolving in time through history and through the human history of time. And in that, it has reached a certain point where we can foresee the culmination of a certain kind of a universal manifestation of reason, which he calls the end of history. Because if human beings possess the fruits of rationality in their completeness, how much further can we go if that indeed is classified as the power of God? So if history ends with the culmination of science and technology, with a global consciousness in which at any point we can contact any other point in our minds or through our minds, when all encyclopedic knowledge is at our disposal at the touch of a button, how much further can mind go? This is our present condition. We have reached this condition, and yet the problems of humanity are the same as they ever were. We still are petty consciousnesses divided from one another, fighting with one another, attempting to build a precarious harmony in a world where we sense that the tremendous powers that we have unleashed through our minds can obliterate us, can extinct us very easily. So mind has come to the end or the limit of its own condition. The philosopher who one may say stands at the head of the modern age is Friedrich Nietzsche. Nietzsche talks of the end of God, the death of God, but with that, in the same breath, he announces the death of man. And he also announces the coming of the Superman. This idea of the Superman as the being who will exceed our humanity, exceed our rationality, exceed the God power of reason for the God power of a super reason, is what Sri Aurobindo also sees in the possibility of a supramental manifestation. In present times, in contemporary times, other great philosophers like Heidegger, like Michel Foucault, have also constantly harped upon this coming of the age of the disappearance of man. Man may disappear either through his obliteration in the machine or through his obliteration and extinction of himself as a race through the reverse possibilities of the use of these rational powers, or through the self-exceeding into a greater consciousness. Sri Aurobindo holds out the promise for this self-exceeding of man, of a supra-rational supermind or a superman, through the idea of the supramental manifestation. Sri Aurobindo gives us in the Life Divine a very clear picture of this position or place of man in the modern world, and why it is that we need to find a greater power of spirit, a greater consciousness of unity and harmony that alone can solve the problems that are at the heart of nature, at the heart of humanity, and most manifest at the heart of the modern age. He tells us, at present, mankind is undergoing an evolutionary crisis in which is concealed a choice of its destiny. For a stage has been reached in which the human mind has achieved in certain directions an enormous development, while in others it stands arrested and bewildered and can no longer find its way. A structure of the external life has been raised up by man's ever-active mind and life will, a structure of an unmanageable hugeness and complexity, for the service of his mental, vital, physical claims and urges, a complex political, social, administrative, economic, cultural machinery, an organized collective means for his intellectual, sensational, aesthetic, and material satisfaction. Man has created a system of civilization which has become too big for his limited mental capacity and understanding, and his still more limited spiritual and moral capacity to utilize and manage. A too dangerous servant of his blundering ego and its appetites. For no greater seeing mind, no intuitive soul of knowledge has yet come to his surface of consciousness, which could make this basic fullness of life a condition for the free growth of something that exceeded it. This new fullness of the means of life might be, by its power for a release from the incessant unsatisfied stress of his economic and physical needs, an opportunity for the full pursuit of other and greater aims surpassing the material existence, for the discovery of a higher truth and good and beauty, for the discovery of a greater and diviner spirit which would intervene and use life for a higher perfection of the being. But it is being used instead for the multiplication of new wants and an aggressive expansion of the collective ego. He continues, a life of unity, mutuality, and harmony, born of a deeper and wider truth of our being, is the only truth of life that can successfully replace the imperfect mental constructions of the past, which were a combination of association and regulated conflict, an accommodation of egos and interests, grouped or dovetailed into each other to form a society, a consolidation by common general life motives, a unification by need, and the pressure of struggle with outside forces. It is such a change and such a reshaping of life for which humanity is blindly beginning to seek, now more and more with a sense that its very existence depends upon finding the way. The evolution of mind working upon life has developed an organization of the activity of mind and use of matter which can no longer be supported by human capacity without an inner change. And he concludes this passage by saying, for the problem is fundamental, and in putting it, evolutionary nature in man is confronting herself with a critical choice which must one day be solved in the true sense if the race is to arrive or even to survive. The evolutionary nisus is pushing towards a development of the cosmic force in terrestrial life, which needs a larger mental and vital being to support it, a wider mind, a greater, more conscious, unanimized life soul, anima, and that again needs an unveiling of the supporting soul and spiritual self within to maintain it. Now, Sri Aurobindo came to the realization that an individual solution, an individual superhuman spiritual being like Ashwapati, for example, or like Sri Aurobindo, could not sufficiently bring about this universal change for mankind, which is the necessity of the evolution of nature and of the modern age itself. But he also realized that the change, if it is to come, must come by the bringing down of the power of integrality that becomes an occult force, aiding nature to realize it. And once that happens, once this descent or intervention, which is the heart of Savitri, happens, and which is what Sri Aurobindo sought to bring down in his own yoga, once that happens, individuals must respond to it in embodying it in their lives and then in groups. So Sri Aurobindo gives us an agenda for the supramental manifestation. He says, it is the spiritual fulfillment of the urge to individual perfection and an inner completeness of being that we mean first when we speak of a divine life. It is the first essential condition of a perfected life on earth, and we are therefore right in making the utmost possible individual perfection our first supreme business. The perfection of the spiritual and pragmatic relation of the individual with all around him is our second preoccupation. The solution of this second desideratum lies in a complete universality and oneness with all life upon earth, which is the other concomitant result of an evolution into the Gnostic consciousness and nature. But there still remains the third desideratum, a new world, a change in the total life of humanity, or at the least a new perfected collective life in the earth nature. This calls for the appearance not only of isolated evolved individuals acting in the unevolved mass, but of many Gnostic individuals forming a new kind of beings and a new common life superior to the present individual and common existence. A collective life of this kind must obviously constitute itself on the same principle as the life of the Gnostic individual. He goes on to talk about this common life and says, all will be united by the evolution of the truth consciousness in them. In the changed way of being, this consciousness would bring about in them, they will feel themselves to be embodiments of a single self, souls of a single reality. Illumined and motived by a fundamental unity of knowledge, actuated by a fundamental unified will and feeling, a life expressing the spiritual truth would find through them its own natural forms of becoming. An order there would be, for truth of oneness creates its own order. A law or laws of living there might be, but these would be self-determined. They would be an expression of the truth of a spiritually united being and the truth of a spiritually unified life. The whole formation of the common existence would be a self-building of the spiritual forces that must work themselves out spontaneously in such a life. These forces would be received inwardly by the inner being and expressed or self-expressed in a native harmony of idea and action and purpose. So this is the drift of the supramental manifestation as Sri Aurobindo foresees it, and as he prophesies it, as he embodies it and makes active through his own yoga, and as he carries in a symbolic form through all the experiences that are its essence in the epic Savitri.